Today we're going to be updating my legendary commander tier list here for Rise of Kingdoms, because it's been over 4 months since we've talked about what the best commanders in the game are, and I recently left KvK where I got the most amount of kill points that I've ever gotten in a single KvK. So my thoughts and opinions on some of these commanders has fluctuated a little bit, and it's important that I update you guys my thoughts and opinions on these commanders, that way you don't make a mistake investing in a commander that might not have a lot of longevity left in their kit. Now before we begin, of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, if you guys appreciate up-to-date tier list for Rise of Kingdoms, make sure you drop a thumbs up on the video. It helps out the channel way more than you think, so thank you to those of you that have done that, and consider subscribing down below. Now I have an important announcement to make really quick. This video is not sponsored by anybody, but my kingdom 1568 is recruiting a very limited number of spots. Applications for migration are already open. They opened just a few days ago. Our ARC team is currently in the top 16 in the Osiris League playoffs, and so we're looking for some super active fighters here. If you're interested in applying, make sure you reach out to the recruitment officers here, Mayhem, RK, or Ehab, and I look forward to fighting alongside some of you. We are a highly competitive kingdom, so spots are very limited and rules are quite strict, but we do be having a lot of fun though. Get prepared for the voice chats. Anyway, kingdom plug over. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and define these tiers here in the tier list. That way you guys know what I'm thinking when I'm ranking these commanders. Starting with S+, these commanders are the current meta. These commanders are some of the must-have commanders in Rise of Kingdoms right now, and I also think that they will continue to be part of the meta for at least a year, if not longer. The S tier is filled with commanders that fall just below that, so these are commanders that might fill out a second army of a particular troop type, but might not necessarily fit in the single best army of that troop type. The A tier are commanders that you might dust off the bench if you are looking to fill in an extra army for your lineup, or if you're looking to stretch out to maybe 3 different armies of a particular troop type. The B tier are commanders that maybe have 1 or 2 uses depending on a specific niche scenario, such as extra poison stacks on Tomiris, or maybe you want the burn effect from Takeda, or maybe you just want a ton of counterattack damage, so you use a commander like Bakal or Martel. The C tier are commanders that barely have any use in the open field at all. Maybe you could scrape together one really weird random trick with them, for example the slowdown effect on Richard, or the all damage on Julius Caesar. The D tier are commanders that are, I mean, they're not the worst commanders in the game, but they are like barely hanging on by a single thread. And then of course the F tier are the worst open field PvP commanders in the game. If you are a free-to-play player, you should only be expertising or investing in the commanders in the S+ tier, and only then, once you've completed all those commanders in that tier, should you consider maybe going for 1 or 2 commanders in the S tier. But typically it's better to just save your sculptures and wait for the next S+ commander. And the final thing I want to remind you guys is that this is an open field PvP tier list, so this is just discussing open field fighting. This is not a rally garrison tier list. Okay, so that's why you might see rally garrison commanders like Eleanor, for example, is in C tier, even though she's a decent cav garrison. In the open field, she's not great. Now that we've gone through and defined all the different tiers here, let's go ahead and adjust this old tier list and bump down some commanders at least 1 or 2 tiers, because I don't think they necessarily deserve to be as high as they are. Starting with the F tier, I'm actually going to do a little bit of a bump up, and this is just going to be for Belisarius and Baibars, because these 2 epic commanders are technically used more than the other epic commanders, at least in KvK1. This is not to say that I think that they're suddenly good now. I'm just saying that technically speaking, they do deserve to be slightly higher than the other epics here in this tier. I am going to bump down Joan a little bit. I don't think that she is as used as once before. I'll move Imhotep down a little bit as well. I know people do use him for his debuff, but yeah, that's a small little change that I'm going to make. And when it comes to the D tier, I think I'm going to leave this as it is. Taking a look at the C tier, I'm going to go ahead and actually bump down Richard. Even though he does have a nice slowdown on the expertise, I feel like the healing that he provides in the open field in the end game is really just going to fill your hospital too fast for him to actually be usable at all. So I mean, again, there might be that instance where you want that slowdown on the expertise, but besides that, he's going to fill your hospital faster than probably anybody else in the C tier here. I'm going to move Caesar up a little bit here. I'm I'm going to keep him in the C tier because I do still think that's where he belongs. And just to be clear, like these lower tiers, I mean, I'm not going to be super specific with their order, like from left to right. You know, you could make a case, especially when you're this low on the tier list, it's like all of them aren't really that useful anyway, so it's kind of whatever. But I do just want to point out that I think some ranged players do use the Julius Caesar because he has that all damage, so he's kind of like a budget build for some ranged players. I just want to point that out. It's something that people use Caesar for, so I'm gonna move him up slightly here because at least he makes sort of an appearance in end game PvP, whereas the rest of the commanders here kind of don't. So yeah, I'm also gonna bump down some of these older commanders that really just don't make an appearance in the end game PvP. You just never really see them. Cao Cao, I'm gonna leave him here just strictly because of the mobility tree. You sometimes see him in altars, and I know that like you're not even really fighting with him in altars, you're just using him to like maybe hold an altar and run around the edges, right? And he's not even like the best person to do that with anymore because there's other faster calves, but like sometimes you see it, right? So I'm gonna leave him there. You never see El Cid, you never see Freddy. These garrison commanders, like I guess technically they're a cut above, right? But I'll leave him just for now. Okay, with that being said, moving on to the B tier, let's go ahead and move down some of these commanders. I recently made a video covering Saladin. I know some people wanted to get my updated thoughts on Saladin since it's been like a year since I talked about him. Gonna move him down a little bit because he's just not on the same caliber as some of these other commanders. Again, for open field PvP, I'm gonna move down Lapu Lapu. I'm not really organizing these super well at this point. I'm also gonna move down Hera, and I'm also gonna move down Mulan. I'll move Mulan up here. She's not really ever used in open field PvP, even though she's super supportive. It's not really a thing, right? You might be able to make the argument like, of course she's great in Canyon. You might want her buffing in Ark of Osiris, for example, the active skill, right? But like at the end of the day, it's really nothing. It's nothing to write home about in open field PvP. So that is that. I'm also going to move down Cyrus, and I'm going to move down Gilgamesh as well. Again, these commanders just do not really compete with the meta, and unlike some of the other commanders here, like obviously Pyrrhus and Thutmose and Martel, these commanders, even though they're older, they at least have like good relics which give them a ton of stats, right? That's kind of the only differentiating factor here. All in all, like Thutmose has a relic that gives him 45% attack and 20% health on top of all the other stats that he's already getting and the march speed, and he has an AoE. And then if you look at a commander like Gilgamesh, it's a single target 1500. Yes, he has 30% health, but he has no march speed at all and like basically no other stats, right? So it's just like I would probably run Thutmose over Gilgamesh these days. Same thing, I'd rather run Thutmose over Cyrus most likely as well. Now I'm not an archer main, so don't quote me on those things, but like we're kind of splitting hairs here also. Like I mean, you're not really using any of these in the end game in the open field, right? But I just want to at least make that distinction where like technically I would say they're slightly better than the other commanders in the C tier. Okay, I'm gonna bring Chandragupta down to the bottom of the list here. Same thing with Herald. I think Chandra just deals damage really slow, and he doesn't even have march speed on his kit either, but the fact that he's calves kind of saves him a little bit. Herald is like still super squishy and barely used because his damage factor is low, but I do think that he might make an appearance before anything you see in like the C tier, for example. I'm actually gonna bring up Martel quite a bit because Martel, with his latest 3rd tier upgrade for his relic, gives him so much attack on top of all of his counterattack damage that you do see him for cheeseburgers sometimes. I know obviously the most common cheeseburger march is something like Liu Che Alex or Liu Che Philip. That's fine, that's fair. Sometimes you do see the Liu Che Martel because some people instantly swarm down the cheeseburger marches, so kind of a technicality there, but I do want to at least mention it. I'm also going to bring Sargon up a little bit. I know people use him sometimes to swarm down flags and things like that, which is definitely a niche role, but as we see some of the newer commanders come into the game, a lot of their effects only work when hitting a troop on the map, right? Or a field troop or something along those lines, right? I know we see a lot of that on commanders like Huo. We see a lot of that on commanders like King Arthur, where you're only getting benefits from hitting a march on the map or a field troop, and it does not apply to hitting a garrison or swarming a flag or anything like that. And for that reason, you know, I still think that there's a small little niche where you can use Sargon because he's not burdened by those specifications. I'll pull Bobber up here a little bit because I do think the range players use him more than the archer players use Tamiris or Ramses or things of that nature. And yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for the B tier. Moving on to the A tier, I'm going to bump down some of these commanders. I am going to bump down our boy Honda. Honda definitely has fallen off for sure. I'm going to bump down Minamoto, even though he does still get a ton of stats. He's just not on the same caliber. I'm going to bump down Gorgo. She's too slow. And also we have so many smite commanders now that her gimmick is kind of not that unique anymore. Choi Young is going to get downgraded as well. He gets a pretty big downgrade, to be honest with you guys. I literally never see him in the field. There's no reason to do that. I'm going to bump down Henry. Single target damage is not the play anymore. I'm also going to bump down Boudica. She's still usable technically, but like you shouldn't be. You know what, I'll leave her at the back of A. I mean, really, you could justify putting her in the B tier, but like, I mean, if you look at everyone else in B tier, I still think you might use Boudica over commanders like Takeda or like Ramses, right? Like she's definitely in a higher caliber than some of these commanders, but like she's definitely not someone you really should be using. I'm gonna bump down Artemisia. She's a little bit too slow for the open field these days, and I think that's gonna do it. I think we're good there. Actually, Scipio Emilianus is gonna get a downgrade as well. I just don't see, he's just not being used, right? Like you could hit hard with him, but no one's doing that because there's just better choices. So we're gonna bump him down as well. A lot of the stuff here in A tier, Trajan is like super niche. Obviously Attila is super niche in an open field march. I do think Zhang Yu is a bit better than them, but he's gonna stay there. I think Justinian is fine. Most players are not using him though, so it is what it is. We'll keep Mehmed here. I think he's a fine flex in. I'm gonna move Tarek way down here with Boudica Prime. He kind of suffers the same fate as her. He doesn't really, like, she has a debuff on the active, he has a rage debuff, he has more all damage and hits a little bit harder. Obviously her damage factor on average is higher, but if he's expertise it's higher, so we'll keep it at that. I'm gonna bump Gaja Mata up here above Margaret. Definitely higher than her, that's for sure. And I think we're all set with the A tier. I think that's fine. Moving to the S tier, we definitely have some downgrades here. I think that Shajar gets the downgrade. I think that with recent face-to-face with the developer announcements, we see that true damage is not mentioned. And so that doesn't mean that it's dead, but it definitely means that it's not really a focal point for the devs right now. And so that kind of leaves her in this weird position where, you know, if she doesn't get more support and everything else continues to get stronger, then she's just going to get worse and worse on this list, because otherwise she's just a really hard-hitting single target skill damage commander, and we don't really care for that much in 2025. I'm also going to bump down Belisarius Prime. Not that he's not good with his expertise, it's just that when you think of the two best cavalry marches, you never come across Belisarius Prime, and so he doesn't belong in the S tier. But we will keep Nevsky here. We're going to move him down to the back of the list here. I think he's going to be probably the next one to fall off here. I know Guan Yu is still hanging in that same camp. These two are like really hanging on by a thread. I do still see Guan Yu's in the open field. I do think his silence, especially as an AoE, is still insane, right? And like he's still usable, he's just not really great. And you would definitely see him in more two army lineups for infantry than you would somebody like Belisarius, for example. Even if he's technically not part of the two army meta, some people haven't upgraded to the Ragnar Prime yet, which is fine. I think Ragnar is just a bit more tanky and hits a little harder, but like some people are still rocking the Guan, so not saying he's better, but I can see why he would be in the S tier, even though he's definitely showing his age like crazy. I'm also going to bump down William Wallace. I know that's like a pretty big jump from top of S tier to top of A tier, but he's just not, again, he's not going to be in the two army lineup for infantry, right? Unless maybe you're a Giga Kraken who has like 2 sets of all legendary pincer stuff, then maybe you would do it, but I'm not seeing it, right? I mean, like, we'll talk about the newer commanders in a moment, but like I just don't see a world where he's in the two army lineup for infantry. We'll talk about that in just a second. In the S plus tier, I do think that we're going to bump down. Oh, this is actually tricky. The reason that this is tricky is because for cavalry, I feel like right now Hua was being used more than Joan, but I think a year from now there's a higher probability that we use Joan than Huo as probably a secondary, right? I think Huo is really shining as a primary now, but as we get better and better commanders, that's going to fade away, whereas Joan as a powerful AoE secondary probably will continue to be the case. Yeah, I almost want to move both of them down because I kind of have they both have their own reasons to not be an S plus right now. I'll move the Joan down because technically speaking, if you're going to run a single Cav March, you're more likely to use the Huo than you would the Joan. So just strictly speaking off of the way people are actually playing the game, I'll put Huo in a higher tier. But again, I can easily see a world where Joan is used longer than Huo, but we'll have to wait and see. That's really just my speculation. I'm going to move the Herman Prime down to the bottom of S plus, but I don't know if I should do the downgrade. And the reason for that is because I know a lot of people say that poison is less and less useful now, which is objectively true, right? We have more smite damage, we now have combo damage, right? However, it looks like we're actually not going to ever get rid of skill damage, because as I mentioned before in the face-to-face with the developers, it seems like, and again this is speculation, but it seems like archers could continue to go down the skill damage path. And if that's the case, then you're always going to get value out of having poison on the field. It's going to be less than it was when he came out, of course, but it's still going to be there. And even if, even with the diminished value of poison, he still has a 3-target AoE, he still has march speed, he still has decent stats for the archers, and he also has a defense reduction and more AoE on the 4th skill, and he can double cast his active, even though it's very unlikely. So his complete kit, even with poison becoming a little bit worse, like, it's still solid. I don't know. I think he's better than everything in the S tier. I do. I mean, like, it is what it is. I'm gonna leave him for now. He's definitely at the bottom here, but I'm gonna leave him for now, and then I'm gonna leave the rest of the S plus tier as it is. So okay, that's kind of the updated old version of the tier list. Let's go ahead and add some of the new commanders. Now, the first commanders we're going to discuss here are actually Cheok and Bertrand, who now will be getting a rework and will be put into season 2 of KVK. Obviously, smite on Cheok and combo on Bertrand. And at the time of recording this video, they are not in the game in that form. They're still using their old stats. And so I actually have no testing data. I have no evidence or proof of their performance, and I've not seen it, right? And so what I'm going to do here is just predict where I think they will go, and then obviously the next version of this tier list we will move them up or down depending on if that's true. I think it's safe to put them at the top of B. I think that they will perform better than a lot of the commanders in B, and certainly better than the commanders in C. I think that there might be an argument to put them at the end of A, but I think their damage factor is just a little bit too low to make that assumption without seeing the data. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about these two. I think in KVK2 they'll be great, but I don't think that they're really going to move the needle otherwise. So I'm going to put them here, and then we'll revise this list later down the line. Moving on, we have the two newest ranged commanders. We have John Hunyadi and we have Stephen III. I'm going to put these commanders probably right here in the tier list. We're going to put them both in mid A. I think that these commanders, they came into the game without that much fanfare. There wasn't any like, oh my god, they broke the game, but they're fine, right? Like, they're good, solid ranged army or ranged commanders, but they're not part of the ranged. Like, if you're building one ranged march, it's still probably going to be Cordoba with Gajamata, right? I mean, it slaps. Cordoba really pops off with that smite AoE, and Gajamata helps him with that. And so they're not part of the single best ranged march from what I can tell. I'm not a ranged player, but they do still seem to be performing good. And I think for players who run ranged, you're seeing them more in the field than you're seeing commanders like Tarek or like Trajan, for example. Like, they're solid, they're fine. It is what it is. They are a bit of a unique, like, there's very few players running to, like, you have to be a siege main to even be running these commanders. So it's like extremely niche, which is why it feels weird to put them in A. But I think performance wise they go there, and I think it makes sense when you see the performance. So yeah, you guys can let me know what you think about this placement. Again, I'm not a siege player, so you can let me know if you think they belong higher or lower than this, but I think like a solid A in terms of performance is where they go, even though they're hyper niche. Next up is Philip, and I think this is going to be a kind of a controversial one. Philip, I think, belongs at the top of S tier. I don't think he goes in S plus, and the reason for that is because besides infantry, I don't know if you can make the claim that he's part of the single best army of that troop type. So for example, well, let's just get this out of the way. King Arthur is an S plus commander, obviously, and if you're going to run one cav march, it's going to be the Huo with King Arthur. The only people not doing that are people who have probably legendary delta armaments, which most players do not have, right? And just from my experience in this past KVK, Huo King Arthur was my best performing cav march. It wasn't even close. It pops off. The Arthur Philip is solid, but it's very squishy, and you need the armaments to make this work. And once we have another better open field cav commander, I don't think that we're going to be using Philip in that role anymore. Same thing with archers. You know, if you're going to run the Zhuge Liang with Philip, then you're benching the Herman, which you might be able to make the case is better, but it's not a super convincing one to me. You're losing out on a ton of damage that you output from somebody like Herman Prime, and hoping that you make up for it with the really short buff on the active skill here and the instant proc damage, which you might depending on the scenario, but I personally would rather run the Herman Prime as the secondary behind the Zhuge Liang. And then that leaves infantry, and I think that you could make the claim that the Liu Che Philip could be your best performing march in KVK right now at the time of recording this, right? It works, right? It works the same way that Liu Che Alex has worked, except the damage factor is slightly higher on Philip, and he's a bit more supportive, and you have that all damage. So lots to love about Philip, right? And you have the chance of extra cast of the active skill, which is nice. It's rare, but it's nice. So like all in all, I think you could make the argument that the Liu Che Philip is the single best infantry pairing. I don't know how long that will be true because we have Bai Qi. We'll talk about that in a second. So for those reasons, he's like a jack of all trades, and he works really well in tons of scenarios. And so because he's so often used, I think people would mistake that for power. But there is a difference between versatility and power on this tier list, and it really depends on how much you value that, right? Like if you're the player who wants the most versatile commander, then okay, you're gonna put Philip up here, right? But I think right now he's kind of being used as a placeholder for what is going to instead take his role once there's more of these new types of damage, right? Speaking of which, we've got Bai Qi again. I'll get to him in a second. Subutai in the open field is not really a thing that I see. I'm gonna put him in the A category, probably around here. Maybe people are trying it out. I haven't really heard too much about it. I think objectively he hits really hard, but he doesn't really have that many stats. And actually, now that I say that, I'm going to put him right here. He's basically the cav version of CPU Emilianus. His super high single target hit is like the only thing carrying him here. So yeah, that's that. He has no stats really otherwise. So yeah, we're going to just leave him in B tier. Next up is our boy Bai Qi, and I don't know where to put him. Obviously, he's not in the game yet at the time of recording this. We've seen pre-release data, but of course it's more important to see real world results. So what I'm going to do here, just like I did with the season 2 reworks of Bertrand and Cheok, is I'm going to predict where I think he's going to be in the meta, and then we will adjust that later down the line. And I think he's either going to be at the back of S plus, or at worst case scenario would be high S. And here's why. And I think, like, for me, if I were to bet, I would put him like here, right? I'd put him here if I was like a betting man. I would say that, you know, the reason that he could end up in high S is because he is extremely squishy, and his kit takes a lot of time to really get going, at least from what we've seen from pre-release results. Now that might not translate to open world fighting, real open field PvP. He might perform even better than we expect, right? But going off of pre-release results, I don't know if that's going to translate one-to-one to real world fighting, because real world fighting, you don't stick to the same target for a super long time, and you don't always fight to the death, and they aren't always fighting to the death. So I don't think he's going to be as broken as he is in the simulator results, but I do think that he is still going to be probably part of the best pairing in the game for infantry. And this is what I was saying before about Philip, where it's like, if you're running the Liu Che Philip, you could be running the Bai Qi with Liu Che. You'll have a double AoE pairing, both of which are going going to benefit tremendously from the pincer formation, and it's going to be on steroids, right? Like it's going to be maybe a little bit squishier because you have a lot of defense here for infantry, whereas you only have 10% health on Bai Qi, and then the rest is attack. But I think the massive amount of damage that you're going to output here with pincer formation as well is going to make up for that fact. Now, the reason that he's below CPO Prime and Ragnar Prime, and by the way, you could make the argument to switch these around. Obviously the debuff, the AoE debuff on CPO is great, march speed and the health is great. Ragnar hits a little harder, right? He's a little bit slower, so it's a trade-off there, and there's no, I mean, there's a debuff, but it's not as good as the health debuff here. But regardless, Bai Qi doesn't really have like crazy debuffs. It's really just raw damage, right? It's raw AoE damage, and you know, I think that's great, and I could be wrong. He could be like top of S plus. We'll just have to wait and see. The other thing about Bai Qi, and the reason that Philip is still kind of down here, and the reason that I bumped down William, is because if you go ahead and you think about, okay, let's run 2 infantry, right? You're gonna, you know, why would you split up the Bai Qi Liu Che when you've got a second infantry set already? That's super good, right? Ragnar CPO is really strong. I've used it in my last 2 KVKs. It's really just the complete package. The only thing that you're missing is like 5 or 10% march speed from Ragnar, but besides that, both AoEs are strong. Both commanders have debuffs. You have a ton of attack, a ton of defense, a little bit of health. There's some instant proc that you have on your CPO. You got a little bit of shielding, a little bit of supportiveness. Like this is really one of the most complete packages in the game right now. And so like we're gonna run Liu Che, Philip, and Bai Qi with Wallace. Wallace doesn't have any support. There's no debuffs here. There's no AoE. His damage factor is really weak compared to these 2 commanders. Like he might be as tanky as these commanders individually, but like that's a big question mark. So like you're sacrificing a double AoE march just to shoehorn in like a subpar, like I get that pincer formation is good, but it's not a sacrifice that I would be willing to make. And I'm an infantry main, and even still, I don't think, even with Bai Qi in the game, I don't think that Wallace makes the 2 army lineup. Like you're gonna bench both Ragnar and CPO just to split up your smite pairing. Maybe, right? Maybe we'll have to wait and see, but that just feels like a leap to me. It feels like a stretch. So maybe that's the case. I just want to throw that in there, maybe, right? But if I were a betting man, I'd say that is unlikely. Last is Tokugawa, and I think that he's gonna be similar to Gorgo. He's not really gonna do much in the field, honestly, and that's pretty much it. Let me just expand a little bit more on King Arthur. I think King Arthur could be a contender for best commander in the game. I think what he needs in order to claim that spot is a secondary that really benefits from the Delta formation and everything that he's doing with combo. I think once that comes into the game and you can run King Arthur as primary with another combo commander, I think that you can easily make the case for him being best commander in the game. I mean, even as a skill damage commander, he hits so insanely hard. It's actually disgusting how strong he is. It's like, I mean, I've shown in the past in previous videos his damage output on his active skill compared to other commanders. He's like an outlier. Like he is just strictly a cut above. He hits way harder than everybody else in this category. It's almost not even close, right? Like there's just so much, there's so many ways to boost skill damage, and he has a ton of his own ways to do that. I think you can easily make the case that he is contender for best commander in the game, but right now he's just held back by the fact that there's not another open field combo commander that you can run with him, and people are making do with Philip, and that's great, but it's not, there's not as much synergy there as you would, you know, expect from a commander like Liu Che with Philip, for example. I think there's a little bit more synergy there, strictly because it just doesn't pop instantly like you see with the Arthur Philip, right? I mean, there's just literally no tankiness on these commanders at all. So that's why I put him here. I did put him above the Zhuge Liang. I think, you know, Zhuge Liang is great, 5 target AoE, and he does have a nice debuff there, and the 4th skill is more AoE. There's a lot of damage coming out of him. I think, you know, all 3 of these commanders are contenders for best commander in the game, but I do think that, you know, Liu Che and Arthur are just really just a slight cut above Zhuge Liang at this point. But archers are going to be the next release we should expect, so I'm excited about that. Curious to know what is going to come. So I'm going to move my head here just so you can see everything in its glory, and that's pretty much going to do it, guys, for today's video. Guys, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, make sure you drop a thumbs up on it. It takes 1 second, and it really does help out the channel a ton. It pushes this video out into the YouTube algorithm, and while you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video, and comment down below your thoughts on the tier list. I'm sure there are some people that are upset about this, so let me know in the comment section below what you disagree with or what you agree with. I would love to hear from you down there. And if you've got nothing to contribute to the tier list conversation, just let me know how your day's been. How's your day been? How's your week been? Let me know down below. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.